Apologies.
We have to start again.
Yes.
Okay.
It is now recording. Yes. Apologies, it did something that wasn't recording. Okay. I'm so sorry about that. It is now. We'll be fine for the next however long. The day is 27th of July 2023. I am Karima Ali, the researcher. I am here with Potasio Talkington, home in Burton Road in Liverpool. And we'll continue. I'm so sorry. But yes, I asked you about the beginnings of your journey, of course, working as a nurse, and you mentioned that you had applied and you hadn't.
Yes, so, and that's where this journey started from, growing up in South Africa,
In apartheid.
educated in South Africa, and training as a general nurse in South Africa. And I think where the change came was when I went to train as a midwife, which was a 1-year course because I'd already done the general. And at the end of that year, we all applied to go back to General Hospital as general nurses and midwives. Well, all the people that I was with applied just like I did, and they all were accepted. No hospital accepted me. And I was sitting there thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? But I've passed. I also deserve to get a place. I didn't. And then one day I was so depressed. I was just staying in bed because I was day off. And a nurse came in and said, I'm looking for Nurse Myers. I said, I am. And she said, oh, Matron wants you in her office. I said, oh, why? And she said, well, she didn't tell me, but she said to come to her office. So I said, oh, okay. And I pulled the blanket over my face. And she said, I won't go until you tell me when you are going to go, because that's what Matron wants. I said, oh, for heaven's sake, well, I'll come now. So I went in, had a shower, quickly went to Matron's office. And she said, sit down, nurse. And I thought, what have I done? And she said, I am so sorry. I've been on holidays. And when I came back, I found this letter on my table. And it has been here for the 2 weeks when I'm away. It comes from a Dr. Steele. And he wants to know if you would like to come and work in his clinic. I said, who is he? She said, I don't know him. I only know the letter. You mean you don't know him either? I said, no, I don't. I have never heard of him. He said, well, he has a clinic apparently, and he wants you to come and work in his clinic. Go and think about it and come back in a day's time, because he phoned this morning to say, have I spoken to you? I thought, so I went back. And in the evening, all my colleagues were all back. And I tell them this, I said, something strange, this Dr. Steele wants me to work in his clinic. No, Ibazi clinic. And one of the girls, I remember her, Joyce, she laughed and she said, what? I know Dr. Steele, he's a vet. I said, what? What is that? South Africa, you don't know names like that. She said, he's a vet and he's in Ibazi clinic. That's where he works. I said, I'm not going to work with animals. I didn't train to work with animals. Well, she said, that's what he does. I've seen him. He goes to white people's houses and he looks after their animals. So I ignored it. 2 days later, the girl comes back. Matron wants you in her office. So I go back to her office and I say to Matron, Matron says, look, it's simple. If you don't want to go to this place, just tell me and I will tell him. But he rang this morning and he wants to know. What was I going to do? All these hospitals had refused my application. So I said to Matron, oh, okay. tell him I'll take the job. And then he said, if you agree to take the job, you have to go to the clinic where he is for an interview. I had no choice, I had nowhere to go. We were closing down in a week's time. I would have to go back home to the rural areas. You know all about that. Where do you get paper? Where do you get the post office? You walk miles. So I said to Matron, yes, I will go for the interview. And I got a taxi and I went for the interview. And I was interviewed by this white man who was lovely. So kind compared to being, if you are walking on the street, they tell you to get off because a white person wants to walk there. Anyway, the story is I accepted that job. He was a vet, but he was employed by the bishop who owned the clinic to be a superintendent of the clinic. So he was looking after the running of the clinic and still doing his vet job somewhere else. It was wonderful. I stayed there for years. But what actually did happen is whilst I was there, the seminary nearby used to have priests who came to have their meetings or whatever, to do whatever they do. And that's where I met Tony Chalkington, who was called Sam, Father Sam. And I give the details in the book how that happened. Story short, obviously we fell in love. So you are falling in love with a white person in apartheid, where if you are found out, you'll be in jail forevermore. And he is a priest, Catholic priest. You know the score. And I'll cut the story short. We ended up in England.
Oh, wow.
There is a story about that. I wanted to learn more about looking after children, nursing children, because our babies were dying in hospitals. You would get 2 children in the same cot. One is malnutrition and the other one is diarrhea and vomiting, and both of them will die because the one with malnutrition caught the diarrhea from the one who came with diarrhea. It was awful. So whilst I was working in the hospital, I really wanted to learn more how I can improve.
In the hospital here or in?
No, in South Africa.
Right.
I haven't come here.
Yes, yeah.
And I just thought, I want to learn how to do more to save these babies who are treated like this. So I applied to the only 2 hospitals in South Africa which did pediatrics, which is training to work with with children. And both of them said, you are not in our province, so it will take you probably 5 years before we can even put you in the list of people to consider. So I went back to the nursing council and I said to them, I really do want to learn how to do this. Do you know for anywhere? And they said, have you thought of going to England? I said, what do you mean England? I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. I knew there was overseas, but I didn't know the specific areas. And they said, well, there's this hospital in England, Great Ormond Street. It's a children's hospital. We can apply for you if you want. What you need to do is to go and get your passport and we will work with England. And it worked. I got the passport. There were difficulties, but eventually I got the passport. I had already met
Tony.
Sam,
Sam.
in the clinic. So when I said, I'm going to England, I've got a place, he went, oh. So I came over and left him in South Africa.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And although it was obvious that we really did love each other.
Yeah.
So I came here, and I came here in no, December was it? December, I think. And he came over in February.
What year?
1969.
Wow.
He came over. He came to Liverpool where I was. He got a job. And 1970, when was Mark born? 1970. Yeah, 1970 we got married here. So that's how I got here. And I worked in Alder Hey. I worked in Sefton General. And I thought, I can't, and it's all part-time in Sefton General. And I had the 2 boys here. And I thought, that can't be the end of my life.
What was it?
Sorry.
There we go. Now.
I had the 2 boys, and I was working in Sefton General Hospital. And I just thought, that can't just be me then. So I went back to night school. And I did O-level sociology and O-level something to do with British economy. And I got O's for the British economy, and I got A-level pass with sociology. I went back to make sure I get that A for the British economy thing, which I did get. Then I applied to the University of Liverpool to do sociology, and I passed. And after the 3rd year, my father-in-law was living with us because his wife had died in the course of time. And I was absolutely frustrated, because when you are still having a year to go back or 2 years, during the summer holidays you study things, you read things. I had finished. I did not have anything to do around Christmas time. So my father-in-law said, I tell you what, you really are frustrated. I'll give you a very nice present for Christmas, but I'll give it to you now. So he bought me a wine making kit. And as I read it, it kept me going. It was wonderful to have something to do, to focus on the boys and school, pick them up in the evening or afternoon. And what I remember most about that is when the wine is ready to be put in bottles, you have to suck and then bring the wine up and then pour it into the bottle. Well, when you suck, some of the wine goes into your mouth.
Yes.
And I didn't know. I swallowed it all up. Because I didn't drink wine. And it was really nice, Swedish wine. And I remember one time, Tony came in that day, and I was like this on the floor. I couldn't get up. Oh, God. So I then finished that, and I went back to do my PhD. And that was just wonderful. That's when I started looking at the society I'm in, the society I've been in. Before, it was just life and you just carry on. So it was absolutely brilliant. And I decided that I wanted to look at racism and race issues, but at 2 separate or intertwined levels. What happens when you are a patient and you are black? And what happens when you are a nurse? Because I lived both of those. And it was during that research that I found out about things like sickle cell. Because my own child could have died of sickle cell. He went to have his ears done under general anesthetic, and that's when people die, when they are put under general anesthetic. You know all about it. And that really brought me to looking at health, race, and what this country is about. And out of that came that very first book, The Racial Politics of Health, is it?
The Racial Politics of Health.
Yeah. I wrote that book, and that's what powered me when it was happening to my own child.
Was this part of your PhD project? Or
It became, no, it was just a separate, more or less I was just looking at what happened to my child. But when I did my PhD, I started with that because I'd had that experience, my child being put under general anesthetic without being checked whether she had sickle cell or not. And that's when it all started. And I looked at the nurses. So in the book that you have got, I've got a case study which I did with one nurse, and she tells her story and how she was treated. So I won't go on to that one, but it is in the appendix. When I finished, did I finish? Yes, I finished my PhD, and I can remember Tony was here looking through it all, and I was due to take it back on Saturday for one of very nice secretaries who was printing it for me, to change all the bits that we had changed. On a Tuesday, I think I took it back. And on a Thursday, Tony died very suddenly. And I didn't want to know anything about PhD or anything. I was going to just sit here and do absolutely nothing and feel sorry for myself. But the two boys were not going to allow me to do that. They wanted food, they wanted to talk to somebody, they wanted somebody to take them when they wanted to go where. So thankfully they pulled me out of that world of that's it. And from that I then finished my PhD in the university. I remember my external examiner came, and my internal examiner was there, and we were all three of us sitting there for the it's not to check, but to have a vocal interview, to talk with this outside person about what you had given him to read. And when we got to this room, my supervisor here just said, well, shall we have a meal first? I would like to take you for a meal, and then we'll come back and work. So we went. Nobody talked about what we'd come for. We had a lovely meal, and when we came back, before we went, the external examiner said to me, just before we go for a meal, so we can all relax, can I just tell you that you have passed? Wow. She said, so we leave it now. We are not going to talk about it. I just want you to relax. We talk about anything else but your work. You have passed. So shall we now go and have a meal? We had a meal, we chatted, and I actually believed that was it. We came back, and he said, now we are going to work. He drilled me for 2 hours. He even found a sentence in my, it's thick, it's like that, in my finished work where I'd quoted his work but forgot to acknowledge him. And I thought, he said, I noticed you have just quoted my book where I say this and this, but I've just looked at where you've put people you've quoted. I'm not there. Anyway, he was wonderful. And he said, look, it's the first kind of PhD work that I've seen. We normally get academic stuff. This is just academic, but very much in the real world. When you do a copy for the university, which you have to, could you do me a favor and do 2? I would love to use yours for my PhD students. I couldn't believe it because I was thinking, So that happened, and I decided that I will find a job in the university because they had put a job. I applied for it, and I had been teaching for them all along in the university as a postgraduate student. And then there was another job in a college which was called the Liverpool Institute of Higher Education in those days. I applied to both, but I really wanted to continue to work in the university. I went for an interview and I didn't get the job in a place where I'd spent so many years and teaching for them since I was a postgraduate. And I can remember one of the lecturers who phoned me to tell me that I didn't get the job, and I just cried with anger. I worked for that university for years, and I have written books and I've done research, and they employed somebody who had just passed her PhD. I can't remember whether she had that, and she came from, it wasn't Oxford, Cambridge. Because she came from Cambridge, she got the job, and I was so angry. But I thought I'd take the Hope one. So I took the Hope job, and I've never looked back.
Oh wow! How can you talk to me about how that journey, starting at Hope, led you to doing the community work? Of course, your PhD project was already embedded in community work, but how did it then become what you did after with the Black Health, a political issue, and mental health, and really digging deep into the mental health work that you became part of?
The mental health work which you're interested in, this was just me, how I moved around. When I was doing research, I needed, like you said, to get some money because there was not enough money. My husband was a social worker. He wasn't getting paid a lot of money either. So the council was taking people to teach in the community. You could choose what you wanted to teach. And I chose to do women in health. And I had about almost 8 groups of women in the whole of Liverpool. And one group was in Liverpool 8, and they were called the Black Sisters, and they were black young women. And they asked me to come and do a course with them.
What year was this?
1985, my husband died. It would have been after Mark died, 1989 maybe. I can't remember. I don't know if I've got things there, but it was in the 1980s. And so I was teaching. I had 2 schools with the women here, and they were very interesting because I went to the teacher. You know, in a junior school, parents take their children there. So I went to the teacher and I said, could you ask the women when they bring their children to go to a room that you will find for us? This is your school. I want to talk to them about women and health, and I want to do a 10-week course. So she did. And funnily enough, after school, and I was there were about 18 or 19 women who went to this room, wanted to hear what I'm talking about. So I told them that it's women and health, and I do courses. We meet for 2 hours a day in the morning, and you would put the children there, you would come to the class with me, and that's how it's going to work. So the first time, it was wonderful. There were about 18 women who came. Absolutely wonderful. And they all came in, all white women, and they all came in and sat on the benches. And I'm standing there, and I'm the teacher. So I prepared everything, and I started talking about this, the first thing. They all just sat there and looked at me. So I said, does anybody want to ask any question? They just sat and looked down like that. I thought, oh God. So we finished and they went. And I thought, I have to go back the following week. Although there probably be 1 or 2 out of the 16 that were there. And I went. And yeah, there were not that many, but 10 came. And I had thought, I'll give them what I'm going to talk about. So I gave them papers. They sat there and they looked at me. So I said, would you like to ask me any question? And one woman said, no, but we like what you are telling us, but that's not really what we want to do right now. We want to make sure that we can fight enough to get a health center in our area. And they described what was happening in their area. Doctors were having small little rooms at the back of their houses, and patients had to file up outside, cold, wet, or whatever, and they laid on these beds on the sheets that the former patient, the other patient, and they said in other parts of the city they now have health centers, but doctors here refuse to have health centers. They want to work independently, and we want health centers here. That's what we want.
Where was here? In
Just down there.
Okay.
About if I drive to go there, you'll see them in the building that is in my book. So the whole thing changed from them just sitting and saying nothing, talking about the drugs that these doctors are giving them, and they're half asleep most of the time because the drugs are getting them like that. Everything came out on that table, and they said, that's what we want to see changed. And I thought, Jesus, what have I been doing with these women, and what have I been doing? These women are saying we want to learn about something that is going to be useful to us. So I said, they said, we don't want to stop your course, but we want also to learn how to deal with the situation we are facing. And they said, some of us have been taking these drugs. We've stopped now. We're not taking these drugs because all they do is make us sleep, make us not bother to do anything. Cut the story short.
Don't cut it short at all. We've got time.
And it became a research group. The women learned, because I said to them, look, if you think you're going to go and say, we want this, you must go with evidence of what is going. Go and talk to other people. We wrote questionnaires.
Surveys.
Yeah, to go to every house near where they live and ask them questions and write everything down. So we became a research group with women who left school at the ages of 14 or 15. But you didn't need to learn that because some of us could write. And from there, they got themselves together. Then they went out and they got people. I'm there, I'm the link. I stood at the back. This was not me. I was just helping them to learn. They wanted to see the what do you call the people who are counselors, doctors who were very much pro patients and all of that. These women changed something totally different. One of them is in my book, and I have asked her to write about that experience. And
in your recent memoir.
In my recent memoirs, and she has written. It's absolutely wonderful. So eventually, the city council and the health authority got together and they built a center.
What's the name of it?
It's Speak Health Center. It's just down here. It is in my book, with the two women who were the ones that pushed it. But what is more interesting is in that process, they changed. They were able to stand in front of any conference and talk, whereas before it was their children and they just go home and they wouldn't speak to anybody because everybody knew that place. You can't do anything with people who live there. They are just lost. You'll read it when you see the book, so we'll leave that. And so when I was writing the book, I found two of those women. One, through that development, had become top social worker. She went to do social work as a result of that. And the other one, and it's such a pity because I haven't been able to trace her, when I was at Hope teaching, years after this happened, and one of the students who came to my class, it's not class when you do
lecture,
not lectures,
seminar,
and I couldn't believe it. It was one of the women that was in Speak, and she had gone and got A-levels, and she was doing a degree at Hope where I was teaching. It was mind-boggling at the time. So I did all of that at Hope, and my son by that time had died, and I was left with Simon. And one day when I was working at Hope, a friend of mine who was very, very good in supporting me when my two men died, my husband and my son, and she said, what did I think about doing some research work? Because everybody then got to know about the kind of research I was doing. It's to make sure that there is something at the end of it. It's not just academic stuff. Would I want to go and see if she can help somehow in health things in South Africa? If I went and had a look and came back with the information, maybe. So I went to my boss and told him, and he said, well, what can I say? You go. They were not losing anything because they continued to pay my salary, because the woman who came to ask for me to go and do the work just paid my salary to them. So it was absolutely brilliant. I spent a whole year in South Africa doing that work.
Okay, can you tell me a bit about the work that you did there in that year? What year was this?
When I came back, that's the book. Published in... I can't look. Oh, it was published in 2000. Oh, I know when I went, because my first granddaughter, who was born in 1996, was 6 months old. I left for South Africa then.
In 96?
1966, I think, yeah.
2 years after the publication of Black Health, a Political Issue.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about that project and how that came about? The work that went into it, the case studies and working with migrant women in the early 90s.
This one here. This one. that was more or less my other part of research. But this one was that was part of my research, and most of this is in the big thick thing that is in the archives for the universities. But I picked up quite a lot of work that I'd done for the PhD and reduced it to this book. So everything that is here is in my PhD, but just brought down to be just and look like an ordinary book. Does that help?
Yes, yes, it does.
Have you read anything of this?
Yes.
Well,
yes.
you'll find all of this in that book.
It's a great book. And can you talk to me about why you think it was important to you at the time, but also now, and the work that you've done since then, to focus on women? Why?
I come from a very patriarchal, like you know, Africa. I can remember when a man, when I said to my father, because we only could do 6 years at school, forced by the church, Catholic Church. If you were at Catholic Church, you went to the school and you had to stay for 6 years and then you can leave. And after the 6 years, I wanted to continue. And I can remember the day when people came to our house. They used to come to anybody's house. If you've got homemade beer and you've got meat, people will just come and eat. You don't have to invite them. And they had heard that I was not going to leave school after 6 years. I wanted to continue. And they were absolutely against it. And it's my father who said, hang on a minute, whose daughter is she? Am I to listen to you telling me what to do with my daughter? And he called them all sorts of names. So, and they said, yeah, but you know, you would lose your bride wealth. Do you have bride wealth where you come from? Where the man who wants to marry you has to pay 10 cattle. Yes, that. Yeah. And my father said, it has nothing to do with you, it's my daughter. Anyway, there's a whole bit of what happened between then and going to Marian Hill, which was a boarding school. And that was because where I was, you came to a certain stage and there was no more education. It finished here. I was so taken up with education, I wanted to do more. So I went across to the boarding school in Marian Hill, which was near Durban. And a lot of the men worked in Durban. And they just said, with despair, are you sending your child to be a prostitute? She's going to work to town and she's going to be a prostitute. No man will ever want to marry her. And my father told them to go to hell. So he left me to do what I wanted. I've forgotten what you want to know about this. Why so women? That's how women were treated. Yeah. You only there to bring in 11 cattle for your family. Yeah. And that was always part of my angst, really, that as women we are not considered. And when I was in Marian Hill, I had a cousin who had been, she was working in the offices, and she used to say to me when she heard I was accepted in Marian Hill, and said, did you tell them everything about you? Do they know what you are like? Because if they did, they would not have accepted you. I said, what do you mean? She said, have you told them that you still wet your bed when you are asleep at night? Did you tell them that? And I went, because now and again I did wet my bed. I said, No, I didn't. Oh, right. Have you told them you still haven't got your periods? And I hadn't. I said, no, I didn't tell them. He said, they will know you have no breast at all. You can't go and be a boarder in a school like that without these things. So I still went to Marian Hill and nobody asked until one day I was in the middle of getting up when I had this dreadful pain and I put my hand and it came out with red. And I thought, God, what is this? So I couldn't go to church in the morning because I was in pain and I'd injured myself, I don't know how. The nun, the superior, came into our bedroom. She always came to make sure every one of us has gone to church. And I was in bed in tears. She said, what's the matter? I said, I don't know, I think I've hurt myself. And she said, where were you? I said, I was here in bed. She said, what do you mean you had to sit? I said, there is blood when I put my head. She came back from her office with pads and tablets, pain tablets. And she said, look, when you feel a bit better, take the tablets. When you feel better, go and have a shower. I'll tell you, the sister who's in charge of you, that you can't come to school, to college, until this afternoon. You'll be fine this afternoon. So I stayed there, take the tablets, and she brought me some tea. She was really nice. And then just before dinner time came and I was still in bed because I was still not quite right, and I had a very loud speaking friend. She rushed upstairs and she said, Pro, they all called me Pro. Pro, my friend, why were you not in the classroom this morning? So I told her. She said, oh, don't tell me. This is the first time, isn't it? I said, what do you mean it's the first time? She said, you're going to have this every month. I thought, I said, no, I'm not. She said, oh, yes, you are. And that's how I actually experienced it. When I went home, of course, I didn't have money to have pads, so I used to make my own using newspapers and all this. And then I went home and I said to my mother, why didn't you tell me about this? I thought it was a joke. So my mother said, and I said, I didn't even hear any adults talking about it. My mother said, because it's not something we can talk about. It's to be hidden. We can't even talk about it. Every woman just stays with...
Just lives with this.
Yeah. And men must have made it clear that we can't go anywhere near cattle, because if you go anywhere near cattle and you're bleeding, the cattle will all die. And I thought, dear God, if we didn't bleed, there wouldn't be humans. We are the centerpiece of this world in terms of producing people, and yet we must hide the very thing that makes us able to do that. And so all those things left me thinking, women's position is really bad. So when I came here, all I wanted to do is to work with women and bring to light who we are and the things that we are capable of doing, and that we are not what men think we are, just there to cook for them. So that's what took me into the women.
Yeah.
I experienced what being a woman in different areas of life. Yeah.
What motivated you to kind of become involved in this work during that time, particularly with your focus on the experiences of Black British women in the UK?
That literally came as a result of me doing research, I think. Because I was doing research, on both sides with the use of the health service as a patient and the use of women as people who are providing that service. I got, what's the right word? The women who were trying to change the nursing service from being so racist had read some of my work, because I wasn't just writing, I was going to conferences and giving papers on what is happening to black people and black women in particular. So I got embedded with everything that had health in it. And that's how I collected a lot of my information, because I met other black women there and I met other white women who were fighting against racism.
Right.
And I had groups in Liverpool. I didn't make them, I joined groups, and in those groups sometimes.
What groups were they?
There were two women. Oh my goodness, is it in my book? I think it is. There were women who were helping. It was called Women's something something. I've forgotten. They're still in Liverpool actually.
Oh, wow. Abyssindi? Abyssindi? Oh, that's...
No. A visit to South Africa, not that one. Not that one. Food research was not demanding. Senior social worker. No, not Untold Stories. So one of the two classes in Liverpool 8 was the Black Women's Group, known as the Black Sisters. And they are the ones that actually were instrumental in making Mary Seacole House a black people's mental health center. It was through that group of women. But there was another.
How did that come about, working with them?
Because I was doing women and health in the community. You know, like they Speak Women. I worked with women. I worked with others in different parts. And these women in Liverpool, definitely, I looked for the others. They knew that I was doing this work and they called me. And I did 10 weeks with them, and we stayed with mental health. And that's how they came into being. But there was also another, there was one which was a women's, it is still there in Liverpool. I went to see them, and they used to have a bus, and they used to travel in different parts and tell women in that area that they would be meeting there, and they would talk to women about health issues. Whereas I used to go to one place, these people traveled to different places. And then the other one was two black women who joined a group of white women, and they were trying to open up the kind of work you are doing. But they didn't have a black woman in it, it was white women. And two young people, why can't I find it? It must be here.
No, don't worry.
And they joined the group, these two young women from Liverpool. And they did wonderful works. They take photographs. That photograph was taken by them. And I kept it because I loved it so much. They did full size cardboard and put women, and they were looking at just a job, because women in this, well, let's say in Liverpool, nobody talked about them doing any work at all. Some of us were in the universities, but if you talk about women, it always, black women in particular, it was always like they must be nurses or they must be working in kitchens, and these women took their time and picked up all the women who were in professional jobs. I still have mine upstairs. He's taller than me. So there was all of that. And the thing that made me more keen to join them is because I'd lost my husband, I'd lost my son, and I just wanted to sit in the house and do nothing. But these groups were there, and I just leached into them. You will see it all here.
It's amazing. Did you ever find any challenges when you were fighting to work with black women around mental health, whether it was officially with the hospital or universities or?
In my work, the kind of racism I came across, you mean?
A challenge, yeah.
I think that there wasn't so much when I was a student in Liverpool University. There was only one occasion when we went to a pub, as students do. They were my friends. Not all of them, but I went with my friends. And we were in a pub, it's still there, Cambridge it's called. And we're all sitting, and some of my friends went to get the beers or whatever they were drinking, and I was left with one fella who still had his drink. And we were all worried because we were doing our exams, and these were the final exams in sociology. And he said to me, well, Pro, I don't know why you are worried about, whether you will pass or not. He said, you are bound to pass. They will make you pass. You are black woman. They won't fail her. And I said, that's interesting. I said, isn't it a shame though? Don't you feel that it's a real shame you are not black? Because, do you know what? If you were black, you would come here and never even bother to look at the books. Just drink yourself silly. And guess what would happen at the end? You will get honors, first class honors, if you were black, won't you? He looked at me. And he stood up and went and got another glass of beer. But it was not that bad in the university, except one of my supervisors. She was against me doing a dissertation for my PhD, which had two angles, the users of the service and the providers of the service. And she said, I won't allow you to do that. And I'm thinking, this is strange. What do I do now? So one time when I'd gone to her room, still this cloud, they had just started getting nurses to go to university, and they wanted lecturers. And I'd finished my university BA, whatever you call it. And I said to her, if I apply to teach, will you be my
reference?
What do you call that?
Reference?
Will you give me your my reference? What she said, why do you want to do that? I said, well, it's a job to teach and get paid. Oh, she said, I don't know about that. She said, You know, I don't know whether, in fact, you need to continue with your PhD. Not everybody is capable of getting a PhD, you know. Why don't you write articles and the two of us can sign them? And that will give you as much opportunity to teach in university. Well, I left. She said some people are just not meant to have PhDs. And I think you are one of them. I walked out and cried my way down the steps. And as I came to the door to come home, a friend of mine who was supervised by the same woman, she was going for hair session. She said, "Hey, what's the matter? What has happened to you?" I said, "Just leave me alone." And I just came home here and I cried my eyes out. I didn't say anything. There were two supervisors. There was a man, Gideon, and Peppy, the woman who said to me, "I'm not meant to have a PhD." I came and I worked on the first part, which was, you know, people and being in hospital or being nursing in hospitals. And that book came out, that little one. And I never mentioned her. I never went to her after that. I never mentioned her name in the book.
Okay.
And the Guardian got hold of it. And it sold like hotcakes. She was seen crying her eyes out that I've left her out of the book. So that was one thing about the, you know, the academic world. It never comes out like "you bloody black woman" or something like that.
Yes.
But it comes in different ways.
Yes.
So that was my experience of that in the university. And sometimes, you know, you are the person leading the tutorial and the students come in and say to you, "Well, do you know when the tutor will be coming?" Because of course you can't be the tutor. You are just a student like that. But they never bothered me that much. They were not going to stop me doing what I wanted to do. But it was all because I didn't have any position, really. It was watered down. We knew it was there. So when I left and I went to Hope, that's when it came out. And you knew that I'm up against it here.
Was there pushback on the work that you were doing?
I kept my work on the women. I kept my work on mental health. I kept my work with Mary Seacole House, which I had helped to build up. But here, I came with that my research, my work, should have some kind of impact on the area I'm working with. And I think the women in Speak were very good at that as well. So I came with my research, and I can remember one of my colleagues saying to me, "It's not research you are doing, you're just a social worker. You're doing social work. You want to change, you want to help people. Academics just explain and show how it is." I said, "I tell you what, why don't you get on with your research and let me get on with my research, social work as it may be." And I knew by then none of them were doing any research. So that was a point where I thought I need to be very convinced that the work I'm doing is not just needed, but it makes me realize where I'm at in this planet and who I am in this planet and what I can do in this planet. So I continued that. So Mary Seacole House is there, gone. But all the other work I did, I wanted to see what is the result of that. So, eventually, when I went to South Africa for a year to do that, came back with that book, I left an extraordinary, in terms of where it was, clinic, which it is even now known as Themba Lesizwe Clinic, which means the hope of the nation. And when you read the book, you will see how it still works. It started with me just doing research and going around and looking and going with the ambulance that used to wait for people. And people would come on a particular time, and if they are not there, the nurses went back. If it rained, the nurses didn't come. If it was too hot, people were actually falling with the heat because it was in the open air. And after the work I'd done, this clinic opened up to people in that area. And all of it is there, but there is a big chunk of it in this book. Because I could not just go and collect information without working with the people there and finding out what do you think would work, and then try and work with them around that. So the woman who had asked me here and who paid for my 1 year there was extremely instrumental, and she asked me because she had seen Mary Seacole House, which came out of the research. And so action-based research knew, she linked it with me, and she wanted some kind of action if I went to South Africa. And it is brilliant. So in the book you will hear people who have seen it talking about it. And one of the reviewers was the head of clinics in that area, and she's just written about what her views were.
Can you talk to me about the beginnings of Mary Seacole House and the work that was done there and continues to kind of be done there? How it came about, how?
Okay, so when I was doing research for my PhD thesis, I was also involved with people in London who were working on mental health, and we were getting a lot of stories about how they are not just treated, but how they end up there. So I'm in Liverpool, and I'm going to these not clinics, I keep mixing all sorts of things.
Seminars?
These conferences where some black doctors are there. I come back to Liverpool, I'm teaching, as I was teaching the women, the black sisters know that I am teaching black health. They invite me to go and do 10 weeks with them, and I find out when I'm working with them that in their community where they live, which is further in the city, not here, in those days, Liverpool 8 was where black people lived. You wouldn't find them anywhere else because people wouldn't sell their houses to them. I got to this after we were thrown out on the house we wanted because my husband, who is white, went to see the house. They said, yes, you can buy it. And then he drove around it with me in it. The next minute the house was not available. And we knew it's because they probably recognized him and they saw a black woman with him. And we were looking at the house we were going to buy. So that was it, finished. And then when we came to this house, I didn't come here. He came with a friend who is a white woman to have a look inside. And that's how we got this house. So I get all lost now. How did I get to be with these women?
Mary Seacole House and the
Yes.
Black Sisters group.
That's right. They were having a big job because they were watching in their own community people at a starting stage with mental illness, staying at home and not getting help, because if they got in touch with the status quo people, they will take them in and then they will they'll section them. So people kept their members at home. These women were going around trying to help, and those who had been taken to a hospital which is away from Liverpool and they were sectioned, these women were taking food and visiting them. They were taking newspapers and visiting them and leaving them with newspapers. They were being told by the patients, the black patients, that they are experiencing racism from patients and from staff. And that's how I got back to mental illness here. I then started doing my own research, and I went to hospitals, talked to doctors, actually saw people myself, and some of them were taken into, I've got a number of case notes, like a woman who was having problems after she'd had her baby. What is it called? Postnatal illness or mental health. And they were sectioning people instead of actually looking after them. So I then got in touch with local people and said, that's after I was with the women, I was still with the women, talked with the women, and we said we need a centre in Liverpool 8 where people would be able to go at an early stage knowing that they will not be sectioned and they would not be treated badly because they are black, by white patients and white staff. Then we started looking for funding because we needed to have a place where people can go at an early stage, and we would get people to counsel them. Well, it took ages. There was so much fight against it. We fought. We got black people in Liverpool and some white people to get together with us. We pushed the health service. We pushed London. We pushed wherever we could push. And eventually we got the money. But we had people who were so supportive, and Nigel Mellor, my partner, was the insider because he worked for the council. He knew which councillors to go and put pressure on and which councillors to avoid because they were very racist. All of that, it was not one person's job. It was all of us
Community
working together. And the council gave us money for that building. And we got that building going. And it was absolutely wonderful to walk in there and find people who would be sitting at home with parents, making cups of tea, painting. You should have seen their paint. You've seen some of it, haven't you?
On the way in.
No.
Oh, in the book. Yes, yeah.
That was done by people in Marisicol House. Absolutely gifted individuals. You've just never, and it was all in 1 minute. You know, they were, and of course, I wasn't working anymore. I was doing painting myself. I learned from them. And you'd go and somebody's sitting next to you and you'd say, come on, that's rubbish. Look, that's what you want to do here. And they were showing me everything I learned from these people. But we had to be careful because you look at what they are doing and think, my God, that's absolutely wonderful. And you might look the other way. When you come back, she or he has put black paint all over it. I don't like it. Oh my God. And that's how I got that way. Their Untold Stories.
The cover.
That's her in the cover. And she was just about to do it. "Ah!" Don't, please, can we have that one? She said, no, I don't want. I said, no, I don't want another one. Just give me that one. She painted that. It was just another world. I love reading that book. The poetry that came from these people.
It's a beautiful book.
So, anyway, that was in the past. That's Mary Seacole House. And it is still going.
Yes.
Today. Nobody in the country has ever given it any recognition. Mary Seacole, I heard this after I left, was going to have a statue somewhere near Mary Seacole House in that area. No, it ended up in London somewhere. I can't remember whereabout in London it is. But that statue was supposed to come here. Yeah.
That brings us to, in what ways do you think your work during this time, that whole period you were working on mental health in the Black community, contributed to kind of changing policies and approaches to mental health within the Black British community, but also in a wider policy making?
That is a very sore point. You write these things, they end up on the desk, somebody reads it, and it's gone. Nobody knows anything about it. And somebody starts saying, mental health and all that, and then they say, well, we need some researcher. Yeah, and it just goes on and on and on. Mary Seacole House, I think, is the longest existing Black organization and still does its work. It's changed.
Of course.
The work is not the same anymore.
In what ways?
It's sort of, I think I envisaged a place that would be big, growing, encompassing everything, not just helping people with their drugs, the treatment, that they would work out and find themselves, that we would have a place with computers where people were learning how to use computers, that we would have teachers, if people are not ready to go to a college, that we would have college people come to this place and start teaching O levels, start teaching A levels, enable people to find themselves. But perhaps that is not all there is to do for yourself. They would start and seriously start selling their paintings, which are absolutely magnificent. And we, as the people working with them, would support them in taking these to where they will sell and bring money back. We literally, foolishly thought that there could be a center linked to the establishment to do all these things and not just leave it to Mary Seacole House, a small group out there. It is still there, but it is not going the way we thought it was going to go. But at least we have somewhere where Black people can go and feel comfortable. We've got somewhere where people who would have put them in a hospital have to answer to the people who are working there to say, why do you want to do that? Whereas before there wasn't.
Right. How important is the community, do you think, in keeping these spaces?
The community is very important, I think. People like me are okay at the beginning, but we move out because we are not experiencing what people are experiencing. If it was left to people like me and I was out there, it probably would have gone. but the people who use that place and the people who work in that place are extremely committed to what is being done and with whom. I've got 2 relatives who work there. One of them is my son. He got a job as, what is it called? My head is going. I'll think about it. It's one. I know where it is. It will be here. He got a job there whilst I was working. Mary Seacole's house. Where is it? Advocacy project. So, and I was the director of the organization when he got a job there. So I backed off and I left the organization. And blow me, if his second daughter doesn't get a job there as well. I wasn't there anymore. I was up there. But both of them, they are very committed in working with people in Mary Seacole House. And I think because it's not just them, they work with other people. Because Mary Seacole House is there are not many people who are sectioned in Mary Seacole House. And particularly the advocacy project, the doctors who did use to do the sectioning have to go through my son and explain to him why is this person being sectioned. So there is still a lot of that. He's not the only one. A lot of people are questioning and making sure that whoever does the sectioning has to answer to them.
Do you think the work that Mary Seacole House does now and that you've done in the last 10, 15 years is still the same work that was being done? Has conditions stayed the same, do you think, for particularly the black community?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because what I said before, that yes, you need to be helping people, right? And that's what we started off, that we will just be there to help people. And we decided that that's not enough. Yes, you need to help people, but help people to help themselves. And the advocacy project was specifically for that reason, that would grow. But not just that they are leading a life in their homes on their own. We thought and fully believed that the advocacy project will actually not just the advocacy, but that Mary Seacole House will create a situation where people make decisions about what they want, but they would be given the opportunity to learn whilst they are still in Mary Seacole House and get their strength about what they can do and can't do, and learn how to deal with the system. I'm not sure that has continued in the way that we had thought it would. I was thinking by now in the university we might have somebody who was a Mary Seacole House user. But I'm not there, and maybe even if I was there, I might not have been able to keep that going.
What is activism to you? Do you consider the work that you've done in the research? Do you consider that to be part of activism?
I don't think I use words really. I just do things, and I'm not capable. My head isn't saying that belongs to that and that. It needs to be done, and I just do it. I don't belong to this group or that group. I belong to the group that I can help to develop, like the Speak group. I never thought of myself as being an activist. Honestly, I just thought, isn't that fantastic? These women are doing so well. Keep at the back, help from the back, let them go forward. So you will listen to what she says, the things they did. This Margaret, she's written in my book. I've got loads of people who have written my books, not all mine.
Great.
And I'm not what's the right word? I don't think that I start things with any idea of where they are going. I'm just walking and I'm thinking, that seems to be a best way to go. Oh, well, that's been stopped. Oh, all right. What about this way? Let's try this way. I've tried probably a lot of different things and they have failed, but they have never stopped me trying again. And I've never worked just on my own. Although people say, well, these academics, they just want to get their books written. Which one was this one? There was so much aggro over this book because it was dealing with Liverpool black people with their illnesses, and I go and write a book about it. I should not have done that. Well, part of my work is to keep a record of what needs to be done or of what some people have done. It created quite a bit of, you have used us to write your book, to be your academic person. Even though it did not have, of course it has to have academic person. It was my PhD, it's come from my PhD. But you've got to accept that that's how people feel and say, well, look, I can't do much about that. I can't change my life to meet your life. But where I think I can do something, I will. You don't need to accept it.
That's true. How do you think the work that you've done, the legacy that is now carved out, has shaped you in a way that it has shaped you?
Working with the women, I think, and mental health people. I always thought that as a lecturer, I am here to give you information, you students, you listen to what I tell you, even if I get that from books, but I am the one to tell you what we are going to do. And meeting those women in Speak who sat there and said nothing, and then said, okay, but this is what we want. When I went to Hope, I had first year Black Studies course. I set that up at Hope. And this American woman in the book, no, she didn't write in the book, she's saying that it, and other people have said that, it was the first Black Studies course in England. I don't know, because I didn't research about that. So,
what was part of this course, the Black Studies course?
Let's have a look. That one. So it's about, history as we know it is about race issues. It's about what people want to believe and people don't want to believe, and it's all sorts of things. And I didn't write it on my own. I wrote it for my students so they could have something, because there was nothing written in that area. But against a lot of people who thought this was not sociology and it is not academic. And I said, it's about history. It contains some Black history. If it isn't, that means European history is not academic. So I learned from these women. So when I came to teach, I had 30 years doing medical sociology. And I learned from these women that you need to give people an opportunity to say what they would like to learn about in your course. So the first term, they all had to listen to me talk about sociological medicine and the doctors and the nurses and the structures and the health service. And that took 10 weeks. The second 10 weeks, I gave it to the students and I said to them, right, next time you come, we are all going to say what we would like to learn for these 10 weeks. So everybody had to say what should be included. And we wrote it all on the board. And then we said, now we're going to do 10 days. You have to choose out of these 30 that are here, which ones should be the ones we take on. There was arguments why that one, and eventually we ended up with 10 lectures which fitted the 10 days, and they all came from what students wanted to learn. And I said, that's fine. Okay, I'll tell you what I will do for each of these. We'll try and get somebody who is working in this field or is in this field to come and be our speaker on that day. And you suggested that, so you are going to lead that discussion. It was absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
But then one was on the elderly people. And I found quite an elderly woman. She was in her late 80s. And she came to talk to them. And we were discussing this before the person came. And one of them said, I want to know if elderly people still have sex. They want to learn. I'm here to teach them. I said, fine. Ask her. She's coming. So she came. And, they asked all sorts of questions. We all took part in the discussion. And then it was about 10 minutes before the hour finished. So I said, excuse me, you haven't asked the question that you said you are going to ask Mrs. So-and-so. And she was a lovely woman. I said, come on, ask me anything. And one of them, very shyly said, well, we wondered if elderly people still have sex. And she said, of course we do. But it is all... She said, it's all dependent on what you call sex. So she said, my husband and my husband has died now, but right up until he died, we slept together in separate beds because when he coughs and turns around like everybody does, it disturbs me. And when I turn around and all, I disturb him. So we all have separate beds. But in the morning, he goes downstairs and makes me a cup of tea. And when he comes back, he gets into my bed and we hug each other. Is that sex enough for you? She was in her 80s.
Oh, wow.
It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I learned that from the women in Speak who said, listen to us. Why are you the one telling us everything? Where are the people that you are telling us about? They are in Liverpool. I invited social workers. I invited doctors. I invited people who worked in the housing. If that is what the students had asked for, and that is what has been put forward, it was brilliant. I loved it.
Did they ever stop teaching this course?
As soon as I left, they stopped. It's not there anymore. And the other thing that I introduced at Hope is the Science Summer School, Black Science Summer School. It is in this book, that one. And you get people saying that, you know, places like Oxford, Cambridge, Liverpool, universities, there are no black students. Because black students are not perhaps clever enough to be taken in these universities.
Is it attainment gap?
Yeah. My argument was, yeah, maybe. But are you telling me that all black students are not bright enough to be able to go to these universities or any university? Well, they don't apply. And I said, how do you apply when your whole life in academia has been seen as waste of time because you will never be anybody? So what then happened in that debate, you know, that black kids are not interested in going to university? I was having lunch at Hope, and I sat next to a woman. Sometimes you sit next to people you don't know. And we started talking, and she was a teacher in a school, children's school. And she was telling me that she is doing after school for mainly black kids, but any kid who wants to join, to talk about science things, science subjects, because they don't seem to be getting enough in the classrooms. Teachers more or less don't concentrate on them. She's talking to me, I'm in the university, and she said, because unless they have enough knowledge and tuition of science subjects at that early age, they will find it difficult to catch up with it when they do O levels and A levels in school, and that's why they might not even be able to go and do anything in the university. And I had noticed that when I was working in Alder Hey, there were black doctors, but they were all Indians. And there was only one Nigerian black doctor, and he was in Sefton. And I knew him because he had a girlfriend in Alder Hey where I worked, a black girlfriend. It was almost like being back in South Africa, no black doctors. So I listened to this girl I'm having lunch with, and she says to me, you know, in America there is a place I can't remember, I'll remember the name of the area. And she says there is a place there where nuns are taking young, poor, black and white children into their convent and whatever, and teach them everything there. And they work with parents, and they work with medical schools, so that the kids they are working with here with science subjects, in the summer they go and have a summer school in a medical center, and they will learn what university life is like. And even here they move away from home and they learn how to be in a university is like, rather than try and go to a place like that at the end of the day. So I'm listening to this girl talking, and I said, this is interesting. by this time I'm a dean. That's another one. I had hell when I was made a dean.
Dean of?
Dean of Community-Based Action Research. I won't go to that one.
At Hope University?
Yeah, at Hope University. My boss, I go to him and I say, I think we must, I definitely want to go to America and see how they do this, because we don't have black doctors, we don't have black whatever. And so my boss said, so what do you suggest you do? I said, this girl says she'll go with me to America. I was so hard-faced.
Good.
And he goes, well, you talk to your deans. If they are going to support you, that's fine. So he gives us money and we go to New Orleans.
Ah.
It was a fantastic place. The nuns did a marvelous job. We were there for a week. So we come back. The nuns had support from their nun world and from America. Americans give a lot of money to support things they like. We come back and I'm saying to Simon, how do we do this? He says, it's your baby, go ahead. So I thought, well, right, we are going to get black kids and they are going to come here in the summer when the college is empty. So I go to Simon and he says, is that what you want to do? I said, yeah. He said, go and talk to your fellow deans and see if they support you financially, because we were all given bits of money to work with as in charge of these places. And they said, it's a good idea. They gave me £100 each. There were only about 5 of us. So there I'm 500. So we send out the invitation. How many kids came? I think. And it's all settled. It will happen when the other kids have gone and will use their rooms. If I can't find it, you'll find it there. I was expecting the first time that we'll get probably something like 10. It was in hundreds. The
Wow.
kids who came, I can't remember, the dates is there, whether it was 140, 150, I don't know, but it was way beyond what I thought.
What year was this?
Can't remember. It will be in there. 1919 something.
Wow.
It's there. I've written about it there. But the point about it is that at a very early age, they came away from their school, away from, maybe not a very good idea, but away from white kids who were making them feel conscious about being black. And they were away from home, to be able to be away from home, because that's what a university will be like. And it was fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I didn't take part a lot in dealing with teaching and doing that. We had people who did all of that. I was sort of their elderly mother, and I went to Houston 8 o'clock in the morning to pick up kids who were brought by parents. And I was the elderly that mothers felt comfortable to give their children to. And I had other youngsters who were there to run around, to stop them running and doing all. And we would be in Liverpool within 2 hours, and we would have taxis arranged waiting to take us to Hope. And they spent a whole week. It was absolutely amazing. That college had never seen a black face of a child working there. I just, it was incredible. We got everybody, and 2, 3, I can't remember how many years. It might even be 10, I can't remember, but it's all in there for you. I get this letter. I'd left Hope by then, inviting me to a wedding in a place near the airport. And I didn't remember. It just came and he said, from your past life, you will not remember me, but I was one of the first children who came to you. I couldn't believe it. And he said, we didn't only learn to be, to get to know what we wanted to do. Some of us found partners there. And one of those is Anita, and we are getting married.
Wow.
And we want you to come. No, not we. He said, it's a surprise, wedding surprise to Anita. It was, I cried.
Of course.
I cried my eyes out. And I think I have got their photograph somewhere here. I couldn't believe it that this boy has remembered me after those many years.
Of course.
It's just the way it came. He said, I was one of those, the very first ones. There they are. That is at the wedding. And he said, don't tell Anita because it's a wedding surprise for her. I was in tears. I just could not believe.
Wow. Oh.
So, I've been in touch with them since then because I wrote to them about this book. And he helped me with Love with No Regrets when I made it into Kindle. But this, I got his actual letter. I still had his letter of invitation. And then I read it, I just want to cry. And at the wedding, I met 5 others who had remained friends with them. One of them was working, I'm not sure if it was one of these big international bodies, not UNICEF, but around that type of, she worked there. 2 were pharmacists, but not in the pharmacy here where they sell drugs, where they make drugs. I couldn't believe it. I was in tears. And others, and Anita did law, and she was working as a solicitor, and her husband was Rex. He was on the computers.
Coder.
And those kids, when you talk to them, they all said what changed us was going to Liverpool, to go to that course. We found ourselves. It wasn't so much the teachers, but it was talking to each other, supporting each other, talking about where do we go from here for one solid week.
Building a community.
Yeah. So when I saw that, I just cried, and I thought, because you don't see yourself when you are doing things. So it's when you look back and you think, dear God, have you had enough?
Amazing. We'll pause it here.